Good afternoon. Bonjour à tout le monde. Warm welcome to the EdTech keynote speech 2. We are pleased and honored today to have with us Barbara Horsapfel, the Vice President of Microsoft Education. Barbara joined Microsoft as Vice President of Education in 2017 with the goal to help empower students around the world in their learning journey. Barbara, we are very pleased to have you with us today. In the last few months, we have migrated to a new dimension for education, to remote learning. The education disruption is affecting more than 1.6 billion learners. Even today, we know that around 500 million will not go back to school, but will continue in remote learning. Barbara, we are really very keen to hear from you today. What are the lessons learned from Microsoft in how to ensure effective and quality and inclusive distance learning? What are the research that you have been conducting and what results you see? What are the preliminary findings related to the work you are doing? We are very keen to see also how you think we can reimagine education going forward to ensure better learning and inclusive learning for all. So we are very keen to hear from you, and of course, I would like to ask our participants to share their question, perspective, question to Barbara, reflection maybe on what Barbara is saying and sharing with us today. Barbara, please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Borhin. Merci beaucoup for that introduction. And of course, I also want to thank UNESCO for hosting Mobile Learning Week and for inviting me to be a part of it. I'm absolutely honored to be here today, at least virtually. And I'm really looking forward to sharing the experiences and the insights we've gathered from listening to education experts, system leaders, and classroom teachers over the last several months. And Microsoft is very proud to be a member of UNESCO's Global Education Coalition. And we are committed to our shared goals of promoting inclusion, equity, and equality as educators around the world work to respond to the disruptions of the past several months and rethink and reimagine education. Let me share my screen here. I hope that works.
It does.
Thank you so much. COVID-19 has really caused a convergence of three crises. There's a public health crisis, there is an economic crisis, and a humanitarian crisis. And education sits at the intersection of all three of them, and the impacts of all of those three crises directly impact education. For example, the public health crisis, through that many schools had to close altogether, therefore limiting the opportunities for millions of students. The economic crisis can have an impact if and how students have access to education at all. And the learning during a humanitarian crisis can have severe impact on a student's learning because the trauma of the humanitarian crisis can cause lifelong issues for that learner. On the flip side, though, education at the center of this can also serve as a very powerful motor and engine to move us to a better future. As the pandemic spread through the world earlier this year, more than 1.6 billion students had their formal education interrupted. And an additional estimated 24 million children and youth could drop out or have no access to school next year due to the pandemic's economic impact alone, according to the UN Secretary General's policy brief on education. Those are staggering numbers. And the experience across and within different countries has also been, we've seen very different pictures around the world, really depending on each country's and region's regions, resources, and governments. So throughout the last 6 months, it's actually almost 7 by now, schools and universities have responded in various different ways. And again, according to their circumstances, specific contexts, as well as resources. Some schools and universities were able to move very quickly to remote learning, and others had to close altogether, sometimes for prolonged periods of time. But despite all of the challenges that we've seen, it has provided the opportunity and an accelerator for schools and systems to rethink the delivery of education, to rethink prioritization of different aspects of education, as well as to rethink how resources are being allocated into and across the educational system. So as part of this, there are a lot of challenges that have been uncovered. And education leaders are looking for answers to some very fundamental questions as they're looking to rethink and reimagine education. First of all, how can we ensure equity? How can we make sure that all students have an opportunity for quality learning? What is the best way to ensure that students are engaged, which is particularly challenging in a remote setting where it's much harder to engage with the students directly, to read body language, to understand where they have questions or where might they be challenged? How can we ensure social connectedness and community, which is such a critical part of education and the learning journey? It's a fundamentally social experience to learn with others and through others. What's the role of technology in all of this? How can technology really enable a hybrid classroom as we move forward? And how can we best integrate pedagogy with technology? And this is a really fundamental issue, that technology does not exist in a vacuum. Technology has to be put into the context of pedagogy to really play the role of an enabler and to allow the delivery and the engagement of education in a remote and hybrid setting in a more scalable fashion. So these are all incredibly complex questions, and unfortunately, they don't have simple answers. And they'll take some time to really address and explore and learn from each other, see what works in different circumstances, and the results that we can drive with that. And it's all part of taking education from responding to the initial crisis to reimagining and really charting a path for the future, a path of creating positive change for the future of learning for all students around the world. Now, education systems have always been in a state of continuous evolution and reform. To respond to different learning research, new findings in terms of how students best learn, as well as to economic and social demands as we moved through the last couple of decades. We've also seen a lot of digital transformation over the past 10 years. But COVID-19 has accelerated this transformation that was already well underway, and we've seen years worth of change in just a matter of weeks. So this acceleration has brought a lot of disruption, but as well the opportunity. And it's really important to recognize the stress the disruption has caused for families, for children, for teachers, and for educators. And at this point, I just want to do a tip of my hat to all the educators around the world who've been working tirelessly over the last 7 months to figure out the best ways to keep their students learning. On the other side, the acceleration of change also brings an opportunity, the opportunity to reimagine the future of education and chart a path that is inclusive for all students around the world. And there are a couple of elements in this transformation that we've learned that will play a critical role as we move forward. So very soon after everything started to change in the spring of this year, which seems like a long time ago by now, we started working with the experts at New Pedagogies for Deep Learning to learn from the examples around the world and to develop insights to help schools and systems outline a strategy for moving through the crisis and into a future-focused system. So this work has been summarized in the paper, Reimagining Education from Remote to Hybrid Learning. And we'd be, of course, very happy to share that in more detail as a follow-up. So as part of that work, we identified 3 key phases that we've seen schools, universities, and entire education systems navigate as they look to address the crisis. First of all, there was, in the first phase, it was all about responding to the crisis in a very timely manner. This was all about speed to keep the students in the learning journey. And then it's about, in a second phase, about transitioning. How do you transition to the next school year or your sort of next phase of education? And then in the third phase, it's really looking back and thinking ahead at the same time to say, how can we take all of those learnings from those previous 2 phases and feed them into what we think our education system should look like as we move forward? So I want to take a quick tour through all of these phases and also illustrate that with examples that we've seen from all around the world. As I said, in the respond phase, this is the initial, to some degree, emergency response that organizations implemented in the very early months of physical schools closing. And as I said, this phase is all about, or was all about, moving extremely quickly and being prepared. So for example, if we look at the Ministry of Education in Senegal, which had been partnering with both UNESCO and Microsoft for the past 4 years already to really expand their ability to serve their geographically very dispersed students, was able to leverage the technology and training that they'd already started working with and invested in to help their schools all around the country to a transition to a remote setting more quickly and more smoothly. So this allowed 3.5 million students stay engaged in learning, leveraging the tools from Microsoft Teams. And of course, we continue to support their learning adoption for remote and hybrid learning. And they are now one of the biggest active users on our platform in that region. So that was one example. And then not too far off from Senegal, in Cabo Verde, the coalition has recently started the process of helping the Ministry of Education get all 120,000 students and 6,000 teachers in K-12 set up with Microsoft Teams to support their remote learning for the new school year. And if I got this information right, they're actually starting this month. So 2 examples in the ability to respond very quickly based on looking before how technology can support pedagogy in the most productive way and leveraging that to then respond very quickly. If we then look at the next phase, the transition phase, and we've seen this very much as a planning phase when education leaders were planning for reopening, whether it be for a fully remote setting or an in-person setting or a hybrid setting. And a lot of schools and systems are still in that phase now because things keep changing and it's a very dynamic and fluid environment. And the purpose here, or the main objective here, is to think through how can we provide a safe and healthy environment for both the students and the staff while we continue to evaluate and improve on how to best deliver learning for all. So as part of this, there's a recent study from Manchester Street Research called Disruptions and Opportunities, Key Lessons from the Spring of 2020. And as part of that research, what they found was that remote learning, for that to be effective, it is really critical to have meaningful engagement, interaction between the students and the teachers, and that teachers need to be enabled to accurately assess student progress. What we found in there is that, again, technology plays a key role here. And they found that teachers and educators who were using tools like Microsoft Teams were 29% more likely than those who didn't to describe their students as highly engaged. The Teams users also were on average 23% more likely to say they feel confident in their ability to assess learning outcomes while teaching remotely. So those were really interesting findings for us to see how the technology can really support the teachers in some of these most critical things, like keeping the students engaged and being able to assess their learning progress. In the Caribbean, UNESCO Global Education Coalition has provided support and strategic thinking to several ministries of education, and countries like Curacao are in the process of transitioning all students and teachers to the Microsoft education tools for remote learning. And what we've started very recently is an online, an online professional development program. And we've already trained more than 3,000 educators so far in how to teach and leverage the technology in a remote and hybrid setting. And if we then move to the third phase of reimagining education, which is of course a very big topic and a very comprehensive topic, it's really about thinking about what are some of the best traditional approaches of education, what are some of the innovative new practices, and blending that with the insights from the very recent experiences to move forward in a setting that is also flexible and that allows for fluidity between in-school sessions as well as hybrid and remote structures. So one example here that I want to share is from Argentina. The Thomas Alva Edison School was already sort of going through the process of rethinking their approach, and we're already using some combination of face-to-face and hybrid and remote approaches. So this also gave them a head start. When they had to close in-person schools, they were actually able to implement their technologies with Microsoft Teams in a very agile and simple way on the devices that the students already had, and they were able to continue all of their academic activities and the daily meetings and the interaction between the students and the teachers, even though they couldn't be in the same physical classroom with each other anymore. So this was an example where having something in place and leveraging the technology to then move really fast and take that as a model for a broader system change as they're moving forward. Another example I want to share is from the Fresno Unified School District in California. And Fresno is one of the largest and most economically diverse districts. And they have been on a journey of reimagining their district for some time with what they called a very intentional personalized learning initiative. And this model really rests on student voice, choice, and collaboration, combined with the deployment of technology for every student, and that in a very large and economically diverse districts. So students who had teachers who were involved in the personalized learning initiative showed statistically significant differences and performing better in their learning outcomes in 6 out of 10 subjects, including critical subjects as math and English. So the examples I've shared with you, all the way from Senegal to California, have been examples in K-12 and sort of broader school systems. But it's also important to note that higher education institutions are facing some of the same challenges. And we've seen a lot of really good examples over the last couple of months, which is unfortunately beyond the time today, and I'd be happy to share them in a different format, of moving through these 3 phases and finding new and different ways to keep their students learning. University of Bologna in Italy is one of them. They had to move super fast at the beginning, as Italy was one of the first countries that got hit very hard by COVID. The University of New South Wales in Australia is another example, as well as the University of South Florida in the US. And they've all taken approaches and adopted approaches that centered around collaboration and communication, leveraging the Teams platform to keep their students engaged in a remote setting. Now, there's one other very critical element in the reimagining of education, which is leveraging the power of data. And as schools and systems work through the stages of the transition, the power of data becomes really critical to evaluating student progress and reevaluating their strategies in education. And so we're working with the UNESCO Institute of Statistics and more than 10 ministries in Latin America, Africa, and Central and Eastern Europe to build on the data that is being generated by remote learning to enable better insight at the ministerial level and what is taking place and taking into account what's taking place in the schools and really streamlining that into their reporting to the UNESCO Sustainable Development Goal monitoring process. We also recognize that a lot of the data is often concentrated in the hands of very few. And to help close that digital divide, Microsoft has launched the Open Data Challenge in partnership with the Open Data Institute. The goal here is to look at the impact of digital access and COVID-19 on young students' education and to address questions about digital access and the relationship it has on learning outcomes. So as we move forward, the past 6, or as I said, almost 7 months by now, it's been very difficult on the one side, but it's also encouraging to see how people around the world have taken up the challenge to adapt and innovate. And so the question is, what do we think education will look like as we move forward? So as education system leaders and classroom teachers work together to move education forward, they're focusing on creating environments for accessible, equitable, student-centered learning that is powered by technology at scale. The key priorities in this reimagined model are to empower all learners with an experience that is first and foremost personalized to their specific individual learning needs, education and a learning experience that is socially embedded and gives them opportunity for collaboration and connection, a system that is inclusive for all learners and for all learners from all learning abilities, that is safe and secure, especially if we think about data privacy and data security, and that is powered by data and insights to keep monitoring and keep moving forward to make improvements. And all of this, it's really critical that it's built on a very clear pedagogical strategy and delivered using a unified set of technology tools. And in closing, this is an ongoing journey, and educators continue to adapt and integrate and find new ways of learning approaches and technologies. And programs such as the UNESCO's Global Education Coalition will continue to assess the needs of education systems around the world and to implement solutions that really help close the digital divide, empower all students to reach their learning goals. For all of us at Microsoft, we're really honored to be a partner and to be part of this journey. And I'm really excited to see the innovations that this partnership can inspire. And again, thank you so much for having me participate in this conference. Thank you again, Borhin, for having me. And I enjoy that hope that everybody enjoys the rest of Mobile Learning Week. Thank you again so much, and happy to answer any questions in the remaining time.
Thank you, Barbara, and merci beaucoup pour cette présentation.
Well, thank you so very much for this presentation. This was very important for all of us to have with us colleagues from Microsoft to introduce or tell us about their experience and take part in our initiatives.
That is coming from the audience and that we also wanted to know, and I think you finished your presentation with it, is the digital divide remains one of the major challenges that we see. And obviously, one of our concern is about the connectivity. It will be interesting to know from your perspective, from all the initiative that Microsoft is running in different contexts, as you presented, from Africa to Latin America to Asia. What are the key actions that we need to take at a global level to leverage maybe the resources within the coalition and other partners to really remove this major challenge related to connectivity? Any major thought from your side, Barbara?
Yeah, thank you so much. Merci beaucoup again. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to answer in English. My French is unfortunately not good enough anymore to do that. But to answer your question, as I said, as part of the Open Data Challenge, that's really a critical piece in this. And to also look at, what are the access challenges that exist around the world and what partnerships can be pulled in. For example, Broadband Now is a company that helps consumers find broadband access in the US, for example. They serve as a data partner. So we're looking at various partnerships around the world to really help school systems access connectivity, since that is a critical part of a remote or hybrid setting.
Thank you, Barbara. Does the data challenge will lead to some global public goods, for example, as part of the process and the product?
Sorry, come again with that question?
Is the data challenge, will that in a way lead to producing global public goods that can be shared at a global level? What will be the output of the challenge?
Yeah, so as we participate in this, of course, we're looking to share any learnings from around the world, as we've done in the past on other initiatives, to say, what are we finding, what are we seeing, what are some of the best practices that we see being implemented, and we'd be happy to share those.
Thank you very much, Barbara. I think that's very good and good to know. I suppose there were a few colleagues asking for the report that you mentioned, and I'm sure that in the chat and in the Q&A, colleagues will be able to share that information, and please share with us any additional information you are having. Maybe a last question. I don't want you to leave without a question that is coming from the floor about more new development. There are questions related to how Microsoft is using now artificial intelligence. Data, you mentioned the data analytics aspect, but how artificial intelligence can help this last point that you are referring to, the personalized pathways, more responding to the equity challenge as well? Is there something that you can share with us in a nutshell, Barbara, please?
Yes, definitely. It's a great question. And for example, there's a lot of data and data insights tools that we've developed to, for example, help teachers see across their classroom how the various students are engaging, where they're making progress, but also to look at where have students not shown up. We've also launched tools that help teachers, and that's a topic we didn't get to in very detail today, but obviously social emotional learning is a critical aspect, and it's never been more important than today. We've also launched some tools that help teachers engage with their students, where the students can share very privately, only with the teacher, sort of how are they feeling today and where are they having challenges. And again, all of these tools help the teachers assess how the students are doing, where they're making progress, so that they can really think through what is the best way to help move the student forward. But then we also have a whole set of analytics tools at the school and district level that can help the system leaders and the district leaders to understand how various schools in their districts are moving forward. So that sort of cross and end-to-end view helps as well. So those are all things that we keep learning. Of course, any feedback also helps us to keep improving, to see what are the best tools we can put into the hands of the system leaders and the teachers, all geared towards making sure that the students progress as fast as possible in their learning outcomes, and that we can keep as many students as possible in the learning journey. But even tools like we're using today around Translator, at the end of the day, those are all AI tools. And again, they also help students whose if they have to interact in a language that might not be their first language, again, are great tools to help them in the learning process. So clearly we're running out of time. There's always more to share, and we'd be happy to follow up sharing any papers and materials that we have.
Thank you very much, Barbara, and please pass on our greetings to Satya, to Anthony, to Alexa, and to all colleagues working with us for advancing the Global Education Coalition agenda. Thank you for being with us today, and thank you for being with us for this EdTech keynotes. Let me
thank you so much.
Thank you, Barbara. Bye. Let me now welcome a friend of UNESCO, a friend of the Global Education Coalition, but a friend of humanity. And I'm really honored to see and to welcome in the EdTech tree Mr. Salman Khan. Salman, it was a pleasure to speak to you on different occasions, and we know that you like engaging in a discussion that is an open discussion. And my colleagues asked me to challenge you, and I'm sure it will be very interesting engagement. The question that we wanted to, and the issue that we want to discuss with you is what is Khan Academy beyond Khan Academy? How your vision and what is your vision and initiatives beyond what has been done? We are discussing about the COVID-19 and reimagining education, how to reimagine Khan Academy in the future. What are your perspectives there? Please, Salman.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. And that's a good question. I haven't had that question before. It's a big question. So, for those folks listening who aren't familiar, we're a not-for-profit with the mission of free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. And there's always been three pillars to that. The first pillar is, what if we could make all of the core academic material from pre-K through elementary, middle, high school, and even college available to the world? Rigorous, not just instruction, but also practice, ways to get feedback, etc. The second pillar is, if we're going to make that available to the world, and our modality is by using online, using the internet, maybe we can not have to make the compromises that have been made in the past when, this notion of free mass public education, which is a very powerful and utopian notion that the world has adopted over the last 200 years, a compromise had to be made where if you have 30 students in a classroom, the only way that a teacher historically could really teach 30 students is if they cover one subject at a time and move all of the students in lockstep. And that works for some kids if you're able to keep up. I think most of us were the lucky ones that didn't have that many gaps and we were able to get pretty far in our education. But we know that a lot of students might get 20% wrong on one unit, then might get 30% wrong on the next unit. Even the one that gets an A, what was the 5% they didn't know? Those gaps accumulate over time. And there's a lot of evidence, and we've seen it on Khan Academy when we try to fix those gaps, that those gaps are the reasons why so many students have trouble with their academics. And if we can only allow some way for them to fill in those gaps and move at their own time and pace, it could lead to much stronger outcomes. So our second pillar is all about personalization and mastery learning. And then the third pillar of the vision is all of that learning that happens either inside or outside of Khan Academy, and this goes a little bit to your question beyond Khan Academy, is are there ways to prove it to the world so that they can, go to higher education, graduate school, get a job, apprenticeship, whatever it is. In terms of where Khan Academy is on that three-pillared vision, over the last 10 or 11 years, we have been actually able to build out all of mathematics, really, from pre-K through calculus, statistics, multivariable calculus, and it's available in 46 languages at different levels of fidelity, but Spanish, Brazilian, Portuguese, 7 or 8 languages in the Indian subcontinent, of course, English. These are at very high fidelity. And then there's another 40 or so languages that are at a fairly high fidelity as well. Science, we are about, I would say, for high school science, we're about halfway on that journey, but we're doing a major push, and this is partially stimulated by COVID, that by next back to school, we want to have all of middle school and high school science and early college science, kind of the general ed courses, completely fleshed out. Once again, any student in the world can go, learn at their own pace, get practice, get feedback, and do it in a personalized way. I think, in the language arts, in the social sciences, that's probably where we have the most work to do. We have some work already done. We have Khan Academy Kids, which is for early learners. And we have some early social science and language arts work, but I think we need more work to be done there. So that's one area where I want to expand a lot more. In terms of how it's used, about half of Khan Academy's usage is students using it on their own or families using it on their own. You could view it as the tutor, the free tutor for the world. But about half of our usage is also in classrooms. And these are teachers saying, I want to be able to reach all of my students where they are. I know all 30 of my students have different needs, have different gaps, need to work at different paces. I'm going to use Khan Academy to do that, where students can learn at their own time and pace. I, as a teacher, am able to keep track of it. And then when we're in the classroom, or now during COVID, when we get on a video conference with each other, I can do a deeper intervention, or I can do a more interactive session with the students. So that's where we are on our journey. If where I'd like to be, beyond Khan Academy, I've always thought about, right now, Khan Academy, I think does a strong job at being able to give you practice feedback, what we call asynchronous instruction, kind of short video on demand instruction. But the gold standard has always been human-to-human interaction, being able to get that connection with another or a group of human beings, being able to be part of a community, being able to get, and ideally getting that in a very personalized way as well. We can make software that personalizes, but a human that personalizes is that much better. And so there's an effort that I've been working on. It really was catalyzed by COVID. The idea was before COVID, but COVID said, okay, we have to do it now because there's so many gaps. And it's called One World Schoolhouse. And this is an effort to pair students who need tutoring sessions with vetted, high quality volunteer tutors, some of whom could be high school students, but very, who are good at teaching and who know their subject matter, to run group tutoring sessions. And we just launched it a few months ago. And already there's some really incredible stories that have come out of it. There's a man in his 40s who's looking to change careers. He works in a factory, and that he's been tutored by a series of 13-year-olds who are helping him learn the math he needs to get his high school diploma. We had a session the other day where the students, they were both Indian students who both spoke the same regional language, Marathi. So they were able to do the session in Marathi. And, you can imagine the student being tutored, their English wasn't that good. So this was another way for them to reach. I ran a session 2 weeks ago, where there was a student from Pakistan, a student from Connecticut, a student from California, and a student from Ghana, all in the same classroom. And I was able to teach limits to them. So that's one area that I'm very, very excited about. The mission there, it's a separate not-for-profit from Khan Academy, but obviously very complementary. That's connecting the world through learning is its mission statement. The third pillar of both Khan Academy and also, schoolhouse.world is how do you connect the knowledge that people get either through Khan Academy or now even through this new schoolhouse.world effort? How do they connect it to real opportunity? And Khan Academy has always had, these assessments, practice that are sampling from a very large item bank. And we said, well, couldn't we use the community of something like schoolhouse.world to verify that someone knows their material? And even better, once they verify their material, if they can become a tutor of that material, that's the best credential you can have. If I can tutor calculus, no one should doubt, and I'm a highly rated tutor. That speaks a lot, not just about my ability to know math, but also my communication, my empathy, my willingness to do good for others. So another piece of schoolhouse.world is students can get certified of their knowledge. So they can take a video of themselves. We have a little tool where they take a video of themselves while they screen capture taking a Khan Academy assessment, which they can do as many times as they need because it keeps generating a new one. And then if they get 90% or higher, they submit it to Schoolhouse. 2 peers will review it, random peers will review it and say, yes, it does look like their work, they didn't cheat. We'll put it on their transcript that they know unit 1 of calculus. And then once you do that, now you're ready to become a tutor yourself. And so once you become a tutor, that's even a higher level of certification. And the University of Chicago just announced last week that they are going to be using this certification for college admissions, this admission cycle. So I'd like to believe this is all very early, that this is the next phase. You know, Khan Academy is going to keep adding content, keep making hopefully it more engaging, more interactive, more efficacious. But then there's a layer of person-to-person interaction with Schoolhouse, and then there's a layer of certification. And I think between all of that, you know, we have a shot in partnership with the global school system of you know, offering new pathways for folks regardless of where they are.
Thank you, Salman. As usual, it's always inspiring to engage with you. There is one concrete question coming from the audience, and then I have a question to continue the dialogue. The question coming from the audience is, are you planning to move from the video to other vehicles, other channels as part of the Khan Academy?
Yeah, great question. So a lot of folks associate Khan Academy with videos, and videos are a part of Khan Academy. It's a very big, you know, and this all started with, you know, back when I was tutoring my cousins as a family project. I actually was writing software for them first so they can get practice and feedback. But then a friend suggested, why don't you make some videos for them? I thought it was a horrible idea. I said, you know, YouTube is for cats playing piano. I didn't take it seriously. But then I gave it a shot, and the videos kind of took on a life of their own. Not only did my cousins famously tell me they like me better on YouTube than in person, but it also, you know, it became clear that people who were not my cousins were watching. So Khan Academy is very known for its videos. But most of our resources, to the, you know, the earlier point, are actually on the interactive exercise side of things. You know, I've always been a big believer that the learning happens by actually practice and by getting feedback and by doing it again. You know, you could watch videos all you want about, you know, how to shoot a basketball, but you're not going to really learn how to shoot a basketball until you start trying to shoot a basketball and you see, did I make the shot? Did I not make the shot? And you keep adjusting. So most of the resources of Khan Academy are actually on the practice side, on the software side, on the recommendation side, on the tools for teachers so that they can surface data, and the videos are there to supplement it. So that's been our main modality. And then what I just talked about with Schoolhouse adds another modality, which is live person-to-person interaction, which might be the most powerful modality of them all. To help people learn.
Right. Maybe related to that question, of course, Khan Academy was before the COVID a very important place where people are coming to learn, but the COVID has increased in a way the traffic. What are the key learnings that you are getting and lessons that you are drawing from the last few months, both in terms of the take-up of some courses or content, or challenge that you can see in terms of the learning process? You are referring to some of the engagement that you are having also across the countries. Is there something that we can learn that we need to address at the global level?
Yeah, you know, I think the learnings are still coming in, but, you know, the big picture that we saw as of last March, you know, our traffic grew 250 to 300% of normal. We were seeing about 60% more people per month. So in a normal month, we see about 20 million learners a month. We were seeing about 30 million. And then the learners that were coming were spending about 60% more. So in a normal time, we were seeing about 30 million learning minutes per day. And then when COVID hit, we started seeing 80, 85, in some days, 90 million learning minutes per day. In terms of the usage, it's been pretty interesting. You know, whatever was the breakdown before, it just increased by the same proportion. So the trends that I just talked about were pretty much every country that Khan Academy's in saw the same, roughly the same. There was a slight variation, but roughly the same type of increases, differences in engagement. You know, in that early phase of COVID, I think people were scrambling, and, you know, Khan Academy was kind of the only thing that was up. You know, there was other things too, but it was one of the few things that people could feel confident is trustworthy, it's accessible, it works for families, it works for teachers, it's nonprofit, it has efficacy studies behind it. There's over 50 efficacy studies behind Khan Academy. And so people immediately turned to it, I think in a very heavy way. Immediately we saw, and I saw this just even in my own friend circle, some teachers were able to immediately, and schools and districts were able to immediately not just do the asynchronous learning, but also do the video conference and keep connection with the students, while other places weren't, sometimes for very good reasons. You know, they had to think about social services or how to get devices to students and things like that. as we, as it became clear that the crisis were going to be longer, we just tried to provide as many supports as possible. We started doing trainings for teachers and parents. We started putting out daily schedules so that you could structure the day. We started putting out learning plans. We started putting out an initiative to keep people learning over the summer, because that's, usually the summer is a lost opportunity, but especially now it was an important one. We realized that, and we've been preaching this for a long time, that in any year, students have all, when they show up on the first day of school, they have all sorts of gaps. And the teachers know that, but they don't know how to address the individual needs. And that's what Khan Academy has always been focused on. But we knew that this year it's going to be worse, because some kids would keep learning, some kids would have gaps. And so we created these, what we call Get Ready for Grade Level courses. For any grade level, we already have, say, the math course in 5th grade or 6th grade or 7th grade. We now also have a Get Ready for 5th grade or 6th grade or 7th grade. And that course has the prerequisites you need to be ready for that. And it's valuable because teachers or students or parents can have the student take the course challenge, and you could view it as the test on the whole course on day one. If they got 90%, 95%, they're ready for grade level work. But if they got 50%, then they can see what they missed and they can work on those units and fill in those gaps. So then they'll be ready for grade level work. And, that can be done in parallel with their regular lockstep work. Ideally, that's not lockstep, it's personalized, or the schools could front load it, or they could do it over the summer so that we can minimize the gap. Other things, you were talking with the previous speaker about the digital divide. This is a very, I think this is that's the number one headline of COVID. I would say the number two headline is, even when you do close the digital divide, even in wealthy countries like the US, there's 5-10% of the population that just stopped engaging for whatever reason. The parents weren't there to support, who knows? And I think that's going to be really difficult, because those were probably already the 5 or 10% of kids who are having trouble. And not only are they going to fall behind academically, but they might, if this is likely to last for another 6, 7, 8 months, they could fall out of the patterns of school altogether. But we're just trying what we can to kind of stay ahead of the curve. And there's going to be some real damage this year. I don't want to, anyone shouldn't feel that this is going to somehow this is going to be a bad year and we're going to be dealing with it for years to come. But what we're trying to do is build what we need for kind of the rebuilding phase. You can imagine if you had a war or a natural disaster, there's a phase of rebuilding. I think we're going to need that in the global education system.
Absolutely. But we would like to rebuild better. And that's about building more inclusive education system, of course. Maybe one question, Salman, how do you work with the school system? Is there a relationship between Khan Academy and school system? I mean, today we had in another session a colleague of yours from Turkey. We know that you are working in very large number of countries. So how do you engage with the local education system to, in a way, build that synergy also, and maybe ensure that the learners that are coming to your platform or to Khan Academy are also bringing back something to their schools, etc.? Please.
Yeah, there's different channels, I guess you could say. One is we have teachers around the world who are using Khan Academy, what we could call in a grassroots way, where the teacher themselves says, hey, this is an interesting tool, it's free. Now we're getting into a generation where even some younger teachers said, I used it in hie school or college. So now they're like, I want to use it. I want to use it with my students. And it's over 200,000 teachers 200,000 teachers around the world have been using it in this way. And, there's kind of two dimensions to the school's work. One is in English. And, that's where we, especially in places like the US, we've been forming formal partnerships with certain school districts on top of the teachers just using it on their own. And what that does is it allows the district to be able to keep track of how it's been working, in certain cases, integrate it with their assessments so that they can understand how the work on Khan Academy is driving growth on the assessments. And then we are actually providing support, training, and all of that. It takes resources to do it. So that's kind of co-resourced by the district or local philanthropy, or with some of our international or national funders. And then when you go international, we have what we call advocates around the world. In Turkey, we have a very great advocate group. And these are independent groups of folks who have reached out to us over the years and are, legitimate and really good. And they they represent Khan Academy in those countries, and that they can take our platform and our tools, and we've built tools for them so that they can not only translate, but in some cases redo the content for their local geography. They can map it to their local standards. And then depending on what they think is the right strategy, some of the advocates are very much focused on a grassroots strategy where they're just trying to build awareness with students and teachers to use it on their own. But some of the international efforts are doing deeper partnerships with ministries of education and school districts. In India, and this isn't an advocate, it's actually our team in India, they have been doing formal partnerships with several large states in India to try to see how we can do it in a more formal and supported way.
And do you see, because we, according to our analysis, and we just finished the global survey with our colleagues at the World Bank and UNICEF, we see that many countries are envisaging to migrate, or at least to engage in more hybrid learning modalities. And with the situation that is evolving very, very quickly, probably this will be the case for many education systems all over the world. How do you see this combination of face-to-face and remote learning? And the Khan Academy is in a way a tool and a possibility also to reinforce this hybrid learning modalities. Do you see something in there for you?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about, one of the silver linings coming out of COVID is that we could get to a world, we could call it hybrid or whatever, but I would call it a more robust learning system where where learning truly isn't bound by time or space, where if, God forbid we have another pandemic or there's a natural disaster or refugees or aliens attack, that the kids won't stop the kids won't stop learning. And I imagine several components of that, even when we get back to normal, that would make us more robust. One is for just daily practice. That's where a platform like Khan Academy is really useful, because even in normal times, if, when you and I went to school, and this is still happening in most school classrooms in the world, the teacher would say, go to your textbook or your workbook and go to page 300 and do, every other problem. And, the next morning they'll just walk around, check your notebook, say, okay, you kind of tried. We're now in a world where it's very easy for a teacher to say, hey, work on this skill on Khan Academy, especially in a math class. We're going to have science in the next year. So especially in math and science, work on this skill on Khan Academy. The benefits over traditional homework or practice is that kids get immediate feedback. It's interactive. They can get solutions. They can get videos. The teacher can know exactly who did what was the most missed question, what to cover in class, how long it took the students. So there's just a lot more data. And then on top of that, the students or the teachers can slowly move to more personalization. They can say, okay, instead of everyone doing the same assignment, if you want, you can go ahead, or if you had trouble with the assignment, you can look at the prerequisite skills, work on those as well, and go at your own time and pace. And so if you did that, then even if, there's a snowstorm or a flood or a hurricane, then the next day the kids will at least keep learning in that way. They'll have their goals. They can keep getting that practice feedback, and the teachers can still keep track of them, even if they're, miles away. The second aspect of it is, a lot of the learning that's been going on right now has been over video conference, the way that we've been talking. And, the schools that are opening up right now, actually my children's school, they opened up for the youngest kids. So my youngest, who's 6, I just dropped him off. And what they're doing is they're doing small cohorts and masks and all of the COVID safety things. But, you could imagine there's certain families that aren't comfortable yet sending their kids in. And so even though half the kids right now are physically in the classroom, they've now set up the technology so that the other half of the kids can still participate in a very, very robust way. And I believe that most schools will hopefully maintain that capability, because even in a class of 30, pretty much every day, there's 1 or 2 kids who are out for some reason or another. Their family's on a trip, they're sick, whatever. And so that by itself makes a huge difference. And then it gives families a lot more flexibility. Then you can add onto that a layer of, well, if you have that mechanism and it's in all school districts, if a student wants to learn a more specialized course that their school doesn't offer, well, then you can have access to a school on the other side of the city, or on the other side of the country, or on the other side of the world, or on Khan Academy, schoolhouse to world, you can imagine. So I think there's going to be a lot of really interesting things that come out of there. And then the last piece is the credentialing. If there's ways, during COVID, it's very hard for students to prove what they know. Grades have gone past fail. A lot of the assessments aren't happening. But if we can get the credentialing and the certification well, so kids can do it from their bedrooms, and it's a global standard recognized all through the world, then that also creates a robustness in the system that you're not going to have, you don't have to do the whole same type of in-person testing, and you can do it whenever, wherever you need.
Oh, thank you, Salman, because this is a question that was coming from the audience and you anticipated it. It's about the assessment and how the assessment will change because of the remote learning, but also the hybrid learning and the form of credential that we will need to consider. Any additional insight about how the assessment is happening through the Khan Academy? Is there something that you can share? I mean, you mentioned some of the initiative that you are also already implementing through this World House initiative. So, what are you learning from the way we are implementing the assessment usually, and how we are dealing with it nowadays?
Yeah, during normal times, I know at least in the US and probably in the world, there's always some anxiety associated with standardized assessment. Oftentimes because they're high stakes, the outcome of it matters a lot. You can imagine, and your SAT score to get, students in the US view it as like, that's what I need for college. And you're in the kind of British system, the A levels, O levels, they really can kind of, and most countries have some type of assessments like that are standardized and high stakes. And so they develop a lot of anxiety. And we know that there's certain students who are very capable, they just don't test well. They get stressed, the time pressure of it. And, in real life, it's not like you have to do things within 40 minutes. Sometimes people who do things more methodically are actually far more effective. And so I think that you're going to have multiple kind of testing regimes, but I think the future of assessment is we don't have to get people into a room anymore with a number 2 pencil and fill in, or with a blue book that they have to. I think there's a world where someone can take an assessment anywhere they are. And then the main question that surfaces is, how do you make sure they're not cheating? And there's a few ways you can do that. First of all, in the old assessment regime, sometimes, I think we try to convince ourselves that but if someone really had to cheat, they probably could, they probably could take a friend's ID, in a large university class of 300 people, they're not checking even IDs half the time. And so someone could come in and just write their name on a paper. So I think even that, we have to be a little bit skeptical of, but there's already mechanisms. I just mentioned one. If you film yourself taking an assessment where you have the screen, you have your face, and you have to talk out loud while you are taking the assessment, that actually is harder to cheat than, being in a room of 300 students and writing someone else's name at the top of your paper. And by explaining it, that's a very powerful modality. Historically, for the last several hundred years, the way that the assessment regimes did that is by explaining your answer in your blue book. Hey, A leads to B, and therefore C, you're writing it out. But now we can capture people's thought in real time. And so I think that's a powerful way. And then the artifact itself, the video itself, when we issue these transcripts on Schoolhouse, not only does it say that, Borhin is mastered unit 1 of calculus, here is the video of him doing it. So you can then click on it. It's like, oh yeah, he knows what he's talking about. And then you can become a tutor in that. That's the ultimate assessment. No one views tutoring as an assessment, but if you can tutor systems of equations in algebra, and you're a highly rated tutor, I don't think anyone's going to, and you have videos of you tutoring, I don't think anyone's going to question whether you know that. And that's impossible to cheat on. It's impossible to game. And I actually think that's the future of assessment. You can do it anytime, any place. And the energy you're putting into assessment is actually positive energy that's helping other people.
Thank you, Salman. We started with the Khan Academy, beyond Khan Academy, and I would like to finish with that, if you don't mind. I know the time is already very short, but Khan Academy is now an intersection with many players, including the GAFAs. I mean, we had our colleagues from Microsoft earlier. How you intersect? What is the place of Khan Academy within this broader? How you partner potentially? How you see collaboration as well in this context?
Yeah, there's a lot of puzzle pieces that all have to fit together to make it easier for especially schools and families, but especially schools. Right now, I've only recently, as we started to do more formal partnerships with schools over the last 2 years, realized how complicated schools have their own student information systems, rostering systems, where there's, the grading systems. They have different tools for different things. They have learning management systems, and it's all a jigsaw puzzle right now, and a jigsaw puzzle where the pieces don't fit together. Khan Academy, all this stuff. So I think, the ecosystem, the Microsofts, the Googles, the Apples, the Khan Academies, we're much smaller than those than those guys. The learning management systems of the world, if the more interoperable we can become, the more it's going to lower the frictions to do everything we just talked about.
Thank you very much, Salman, for being with us today in the EdTech keynote. We are always very pleased to engage with you. We had a very inspiring discussion before summer, and I would like to inform you that today we launched what we call the Global Learning House, and the objective is really to leave no one behind. And I'm sure that with Khan Academy, we will advance. You mentioned many of the initiatives that fall under the spirit and the value of this, the objective that we are setting for this initiative. And we look forward for collaboration and engagement. Salman, thank you for being with us today, and we hope to have you with us more and more. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, Martin.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Dear colleagues, thank you for being with us for the EdTechs. The Mobile Learning Week doesn't finish here. Stay tuned. We have a very inspiring day tomorrow, and you can continue engaging with us. Thank you very much.